Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take some really compelling sources, break them down, and give you the insights that matter.
Our goal is to get you up to speed fast, but also, make it engaging, even a little surprising.
Definitely. And today, we're diving into something that feels both historical, but also, wow, really relevant right now. It might just change how you look at things a bit.
The big one.
It is. So I want you to do something for me. Just picture it for a second. The late 70s, maybe the early 80s.
Okay.
The Soviet Union, outwardly it looked immense, like unshakable, this massive empire.
Nuclear arsenal, huge landmass,
Yeah.
the whole package.
An ideology that felt like it would just last forever. It seemed eternal, didn't it?
Too many, yes. It was just part of the global furniture.
And then, boom, 1991.
Ah.
It just vanishes. It collapsed so fast, so unexpectedly. The whole world was just stunned.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that feeling of disbelief? Or maybe you're younger, but have you ever just stopped and thought, how could something that powerful just evaporate?
It's still pretty extraordinary to think about.
Mm.
Even for historians, the sheer speed of that implosion is, well, it's something else.
Right.
And what's really striking when you look back is how few people actually saw it coming. Even the smartest analysts, the intelligence agencies, they mostly missed how fast and total it would be.
Which tells you something, I guess.
It really does. It's a huge reminder, isn't it, that outward strength can hide some really deep internal problems. Like a grand old house that's secretly rotting from the inside.
That's a perfect image. And that exact moment, that question, how does an empire just disappear? That's what kicked off this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
We're tackling a really provocative question posed by the historian Niall Ferguson. You've probably heard of him.
Oh, yes. He's known for these big sweeping comparisons.
Exactly. And in June 2024, he wrote this essay in the Free Press titled, "Are We the Soviets Now?" He's talked about it since then, too. It's really stirred things up.
It certainly has.
Now, hold on. Before anyone gets the wrong idea, we need to be super clear here. Ferguson is not saying the U.S. is turning communist. That's not the point at all. His work is way more subtle than that.
Absolutely crucial point. What he's doing is drawing an analogy, and he admits it's intentionally sharp-edged. He's using the Soviet experience like a mirror.
A mirror.
Yeah, to look for symptoms. Patterns of decline, systems getting rigid, maybe a kind of cultural funk. Things he thinks look unsettlingly similar to the late Soviet Union.
So it's designed to be provocative, to make us think.
Precisely. It's meant to shake us out of complacency, maybe challenge us to look at America in a fresh way, maybe an uncomfortable way.
Okay. And that's our mission today. We're going to unpack Ferguson's argument, really get into his main points, these parallels he draws between the U.S. now and the USSR back then.
And then we'll look at the arguments against his idea, too, because there are strong counter-arguments.
Absolutely. We need balance. And then, the big one. If there's any truth to his warnings, what could actually be done? Are there remedies?
Right. It's not about predicting the future. It's about understanding the forces at play.
Exactly. We're not fortune tellers. We just want to help you understand this complex comparison, maybe find some surprising insights from history. We'll guide you through it. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Niall Ferguson. As you said, he loves these big historical analogies. He uses the past to make us look hard at the present, even if it's not pretty.
He's definitely not afraid to be controversial.
No. And in this essay, Are We the Soviets Now?, he asks if the U.S. is showing signs of what he calls sclerosis, like hardening of the arteries, but for a whole country.
Yeah, the system getting old, rigid, slow to react. That's the idea. He sees parallels to the USSR in the 70s and 80s.
And he's very upfront that this isn't a perfect match, right?
Oh, completely. He stresses the comparison is intentionally sharp-edged. It's not literal. He's not saying we're about to start 5-year plans or anything.
Okay.
He's using the Soviets as a kind of historical case study, a powerful example, to spark a debate about where the U.S. is heading. Are we ignoring warning signs? That's the question he wants us to ask. Signs that maybe people missed back then, too.
So not are we the Soviets, but are we showing symptoms that look familiar? And he lays out 6 main ones, right? 6 parallels.
That's right. 6 core symptoms of decline he sees in both places.
Let's tackle the first one, gerontocracy, which basically means rule by the old, leaders outlasting their nations.
Yeah, and this one hits close to home because it's so visible, right? You can't really miss it. Ferguson argues American leadership, especially the presidency and Congress, is just dominated by older people.
And maybe out of touch.
That's his argument. Potentially out of touch with large parts of the public. I mean, look at 2024. Joe Biden, 81. Donald Trump, 78. Competing for president. two of the oldest ever.
And it goes beyond the White House. He talks about the Senate, too. The average age of a senator in 2025 will be, what, 65?
Median age, yeah, 65. And many have been there for decades. Think about Mitch McConnell. He'll be 83. Nancy Pelosi, 85.
And we've seen health scares, moments where people question if they're still up to the job. It makes you ask, are we valuing experience so much that we're getting stuck, stagnant?
And boom, that's where the Soviet parallel comes in, sharp and clear. Ferguson points straight to the Politburo under Brezhnev, Andropov, Chernenko.
Right, those old guys who seem to be there forever.
Exactly. Leaders who were often visibly ill,
Yeah.
sometimes barely functioning, and their inner circle, their entourages, would kind of prop them up, hide how bad things were to keep stability, or maybe just keep their own power.
And the result?
Policy paralysis. Big decisions just didn't get made. The whole country felt stuck in mud, like a giant ship with sick captains, and nobody dares change course.
Wow. So how does he connect that to the U.S. today, specifically?
He made this comment about the Democratic Party maybe trying to push Biden out in 2024 after some rough moments. He called it almost a Soviet-style palace coup. Yeah. His point was that leadership change in America now, just like in the late USSR, seems to get delayed and delayed until there's a crisis. It doesn't happen smoothly, naturally.
The system struggles to refresh itself. Bring in new people, new ideas.
That's the implication. By the time change is forced, maybe the country's already stuck in that policy paralysis he talked about.
Okay. Symptom number 2, economic illusion, growth on steroids. This sounds intriguing.
It is, because if you just look at the headlines, the U.S. economy often looks pretty good, right? 2024 GDP growth around 2.5%. That's better than a lot of Europe, better than Japan.
Yeah, low unemployment, stock market records. Those are the numbers we usually hear.
But Ferguson says, hold on, is this strength real? Or is it kind of artificial? Like it's pumped up on fiscal steroids.
Steroids meaning debt.
Exactly. Unsustainable deficits and debt. The U.S. federal debt is now over 120% of GDP. That's huge. And we're still running deficits over $1 trillion every year.
Which isn't just numbers on a page, right? It's a real vulnerability long term.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
It makes you ask, how much of this growth is just borrowing from the future?
And the Soviet parallel here.
Oh, it's chilling. The Soviets were masters of exaggerating their economic strength. Their central planning produced big industrial numbers, sure. But a lot of it was junk.
Junk how?
Misallocated resources, incredible inefficiency, factories making tractor parts that didn't fit any tractors, that kind of thing. And a massive chunk of their economy, maybe up to 20% of GDP, went straight into military spending.
Without actually helping people.
Right. Didn't improve quality of life, didn't produce useful goods. It looked strong on paper, but it was hollowing itself out.
Right.
And Western analysts often bought the numbers. They overestimated Soviet strength for years until it all just collapsed.
So it's not just how much you spend, but what you spend it on and how effectively.
Precisely. And Ferguson connects this straight to the U.S. Look at the U.S. military budget, over $800 billion a year, more than the next 10 countries combined.
That's staggering.
And he asks, what's the real strategic payoff? Then he points to the trillions spent on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Decades long, huge cost, and, well, questionable strategic gains in the end.
That fits the pattern. Huge spending, inefficient outcomes.
That's his parallel. He also brings up rising inequality, the top 1% holding over 30% of the wealth, while a lot of people struggle. He says that disparity hides fragility beneath the headline GDP numbers.
Okay, moving from money to ideas. Symptom 3, ideological orthodoxy. From Marxism-Leninism to wokeism. This one sounds like it could be controversial.
It definitely is. His argument is this. Just like the Soviet system enforced conformity to Marx-Leninism, he claims modern America imposes a kind of woke orthodoxy, especially through elite institutions.
Which institutions?
Universities, mainstream media, big corporations. It's not the government imposing it directly, like in the USSR, but more of a pervasive cultural influence in those spheres.
So what does this look like in practice, according to him? What's the orthodoxy?
He talks about things like diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives. He argues they become like mandatory rituals in these places.
Mandatory rituals.
Yeah, not just suggestions, but practices that affect hiring, promotions, even what people feel safe saying. He believes it stifles dissent.
Not with prison camps, obviously.
No, of course not. But through things like cancellation, risks to your career, and maybe most powerfully, just widespread self-censorship. People biting their tongues.
And the Soviet parallel is the pressure to conform.
Exactly. In the USSR, you had to publicly support the party line, Marxism, Leninism, even if you privately thought it was nonsense. Real dissent was crushed, censorship, prison, exile.
So Ferguson's saying that while the consequences aren't nearly as severe in the U.S., the dynamic is similar, people performing agreement.
That's his claim, that the social and professional risks of going against the grain create a similar kind of public cynicism. People say the right things in public, go through the motions, but privately they might be rolling their eyes or thinking something completely different.
A society performing belief.
That's the unsettling idea he puts forward, a gap between public performance and private conviction.
Wow, that is uncomfortable to think about. Okay, number 4, social decay, life expectancy and despair. This sounds grim.
It is grim.
Yeah.
Ferguson argues that declining health outcomes and social indicators point to a society maybe eating itself from within.
What's the evidence here?
Well, look at U.S. life expectancy. It dropped to 76.4 years in 2021. That was the lowest in decades.
Was that just COVID?
COVID was a big part, but it wasn't the only factor. The opioid crisis, obesity, they were already dragging it down. It did bounce back a bit to 78.1 by 2024, but that's still way below a lot of other rich countries.
And the opioids, the numbers are shocking.
Truly shocking. Over 100,000 Americans dying every year from fentanyl overdoses alone. Plus rising rates of suicide, depression. It suggests a deep societal unease.
And he links this back to the Soviets.
Directly. The USSR in the 80s had its own major health crisis. Male life expectancy stalled out around 62.
62. Wow.
Yeah. Driven by massive alcoholism, terrible health care, and just this pervasive feeling of hopelessness, of despair as this system crumbled. Ferguson sees parallels in the U.S. struggles.
It's not just physical health, it's social health.
Exactly. He also points to the widening inequality gap. He compares the wealthy elites in tech, finance, D.C. enjoying luxury to the Soviet nomenklatura.
The party elites who had special privileges.
Right. Special shops, better health care, dachas, completely separate from ordinary people's struggles. He suggests a similar divide is growing in the U.S., millions struggling, while a privileged few live in a different reality.
And surveillance, too.
Yeah, he even throws in the rise of mass surveillance by tech companies, by government programs, suggesting it echoes Soviet control, maybe in a more modern digital way. It adds to a feeling of, well, not being entirely free.
Okay, symptom 5 feels like classic history. Imperial overstretch, the American empire's burden.
Yes, this ties into well-known theories about why great powers fall. Ferguson explicitly brings up Paul Kennedy's idea of imperial overstretch.
Remind us what that is again.
It's when a great power's global commitments, military bases, alliances, interventions, basically grow bigger than its resources can sustain. You're trying to do too much, everywhere all at once. Eventually something breaks.
And he sees the U.S. in that position now.
He argues, yes. Look at the sheer scale. America maintains somewhere between 750 and 800 military bases overseas. That's a huge footprint.
Plus the wars.
Right. Decades-long wars in Afghanistan, Iraq. Trillions spent. What were the long-term strategic gains? He questions if they were worth the immense cost in money, lives, and political focus. It's a massive drain.
And the Soviet parallel is obvious there, I suppose.
Very much so. The Soviet Union stretched itself incredibly thin. Their war in Afghanistan was their Vietnam, a bloody, costly disaster that drained money and morale.
The quagmire.
Exactly. And their empire in Eastern Europe, Cuba, Africa.
Yeah.
It all became too expensive, too difficult to maintain. It just collapsed under its own weight.
And he links the U.S. border situation to this, too.
Yeah, interestingly, he connects the struggles at the U.S. southern border, over 10 million migrant encounters since 2021, straining systems to the USSR's own internal ethnic tensions and border stresses. A kind of inability to manage the edges of the empire, maybe? A sign of weakening control.
That's a fascinating angle. Okay, the 6th and final symptom, cultural cynicism. When faith in institutions dies, this one feels incredibly current.
It really does. And Ferguson suggests this might be the most dangerous parallel of all, because it eats away at the very trust that holds a society together.
How did that look in the Soviet Union?
Well, eventually people just stopped believing, not just the propaganda, but the whole system. They relied on underground literature, the samizdat, copied by hand. They used black markets. They told jokes about the leaders. They just assumed anything official was probably a lie. A total breakdown of trust, complete cynicism, a collective eye roll at the state.
And he sees echoes of that in the U.S. now. It feels like trust is low, but is it that low?
He points to the data. Pew Research, 2024. Only 25% of Americans trust the federal government. That's incredibly low.
Yeah.
And it's not just D.C. Confidence in Congress, The media, big business, even the Supreme Court. It's plummeted.
And when trust collapses.
Conspiracy theories take root. Fake news spreads like wildfire because people don't know who or what to believe anymore. There's no shared baseline reality. Ferguson argues this mood is alarmingly similar to the late Soviet condition. The official story loses credibility, and the whole system gets hollowed out from within, making it fragile.
Okay, so those are the 6 parallels. It's a lot. And quite sobering. Before we push back, let's just quickly recap why this analogy, even if uncomfortable, strikes a chord. There's real data here.
There absolutely is.
Okay.
It's not just Ferguson spinning a narrative. The leadership fatigue, you can look at the ages. The median age for senators hitting 65, folks serving for 30, 40 years, that's factual. And it does directly remind you of that stagnant Soviet elite.
And the money. The debt and defense burdens.
Hard numbers. Federal debt, over 120% of GDP. Trillion-dollar deficits annually. The $800 billion plus military budget. These are facts. And when you pair that massive spending with, let's say, debatable strategic results, the Soviet inefficiency comparison feels, well, uncomfortably relevant.
Then the public health and trust figures. Life expectancy struggles, the horrific fentanyl death toll over 100,000 a year, and that rock-bottom trust in government, 25%. These aren't opinions. They're measurable signs of distress.
They paint a picture of a society facing real internal challenges. And Ferguson is smart to connect this to broader historical frameworks. He's not just inventing this idea.
Right, he's drawing on people like Paul Kennedy.
Kennedy's imperial overstretch, Mann-Kerr-Olson's institutional sclerosis. These are established theories arguing that great powers often rot from within. Internal decay, rigid institutions, inability to adapt, that's usually the killer, not some external enemy. Ferguson's warning fits right into that long-standing historical argument.
Okay, so the case for the analogy has some serious weight behind it, but it's definitely not the whole story. A lot of people push back hard against this comparison.
Absolutely. And it's crucial we explore that.
Yeah.
This brings us to the case against the analogy. Probably the biggest difference is democratic renewal versus Soviet stasis.
Meaning?
The Soviet Union was a dictatorship. One party. Leaders usually left office only when they died or got poofed out in some internal power struggle. No free elections, no real way for people to change things peacefully. The system was designed to resist change.
Whereas the U.S., it's messy, but it's different.
Fundamentally different. We have free elections, competing parties, peaceful transitions of power most of the time, term limits for the president. It's a dynamic system, even when it's gridlocked.
So critics might say, even the Biden faced pressure in 2024, that's the system working, adapting, not being rigid like the Soviets.
Exactly. It shows responsiveness, potentially. And you see new leaders emerging, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, younger faces in Congress. There's a built-in potential for generational change that the USSR totally lacked. The U.S. system has ways to renew itself, even if it's slow sometimes.
Okay, difference number 2. Economic vitality versus central planning. That seems huge.
Massive. The Soviet economy was famously awful, centrally planned, totally unresponsive to what people needed, chronic shortages, long lines, just deeply inefficient. It couldn't innovate.
And the U.S. economy, for all its problems like debt.
It's still the world's innovation engine. Silicon Valley, Apple, NVIDIA, Microsoft, they drive global tech. Huge dynamism in AI, biotech, clean energy. American companies lead the way.
Plus, the economy has shown resilience.
Yeah, in 2024, it grew faster than Europe and Japan. Stock markets hit records, unemployment stayed relatively low, and don't forget the U.S. dollar. Its global dominance gives America financial leeway, the ability to carry debt that the Soviet Union never dreamed of. The U.S. economy can reinvent itself in ways the Soviet system never could.
Third difference, cultural pluralism versus enforced orthodoxy. Now, Ferguson talks about wokeism, but is it really like Soviet ideology?
Critics say no way. While certain progressive ideas might be influential in universities or corporations, they face constant pushback, legally, politically, culturally.
It's a fight, not a lockdown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have Supreme Court decisions rolling back things like affirmative action. You have a huge conservative media ecosystem constantly challenging progressive views. Ideas are openly contested in the courts, the media, at the ballot box.
Unlike the USSR, where you went to jail for disagreeing.
Right. It's a noisy, messy marketplace of ideas here, however polarized it gets. It's not state-enforced silence. That's a fundamental difference.
Okay, point 4. Immigration as strength versus Soviet isolation. This feels like a key contrast.
Huge contrast. The Soviet Union was walled off. The Iron Curtain kept people in, kept ideas out. It led to stagnation, brain drain, total isolation.
And the U.S., despite the border challenges.
The U.S. is a magnet. It attracts millions of people. Yes, the current border situation is a massive problem, straining resources and causing chaos. But historically, and even now, immigration fuels growth, keeps the population younger, brings new talent and energy.
The IMF numbers back that up.
Yeah, they estimate immigration added 0.5% to U.S. GDP annually recently. Immigrants start businesses, drive innovation. It's a source of constant renewal the Soviets completely lacked.
Then there's the whole structure of society, resilient civil society versus state monopoly.
Another crucial difference. The Soviet state controlled almost everything, the economy, media, courts, culture. There were no independent checks on power.
But America has.
A whole ecosystem of independent institutions, a robust civil society, a free, if chaotic, media, that entrepreneurial drive we talked about. Plus, mechanisms for accountability, investigative journalists digging up dirt, independent courts, those elections again. These institutions are designed, however imperfectly, to catch problems and correct course. They're like the body's immune system, fighting off decay. The USSR had no such system.
Finally, some critics just worry about the alarmism itself, that Ferguson's warning could backfire.
Yeah, people like Jonah Goldberg argue that constantly comparing the U.S. to a collapsing empire risks becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you convince everyone things are hopeless, maybe they stop trying to fix them.
It could undermine confidence, make people give up.
Possibly. It raises a really interesting question. Can warnings about decline actually make decline more likely by creating a sense of fatalism instead of spurring action?
That's a deep question. It really highlights why understanding the actual Soviet decline is so important for judging Ferguson's analogy. We need that historical context.
We absolutely do. To really get what Ferguson is driving at, or to argue against it effectively, you need to revisit what actually happened in the USSR's final decades.
So let's quickly step back into that history, starting with the Brezhnev stagnation, roughly 1964 to 82. What defined that era?
Stagnation is the perfect word. Economic growth just slowed way down. The system felt incredibly rigid, resistant to any real reform, even though the problems were obvious. Think of that creaky old engine again.
And corruption.
Rampant. It almost became necessary to get anything done in the bureaucracy. Meanwhile, huge amounts of money kept pouring into the military, not into making life better for ordinary people. And the leadership, as we said, was old, entrenched, allergic to change. Just a deep sense of malaise settled over the country.
And that fragile state then got entangled in the Afghan war from 79 to 89.
Yeah, a truly disastrous decision. Afghanistan became the Soviet Union's Vietnam, a brutal, expensive, unwinnable war that dragged on for a decade.
What was the impact?
Terrible. Drained money, resources, manpower. Over 15,000 Soviet soldiers died. It shattered morale back home. It was this very public demonstration of the limits of Soviet power, and it really damaged people's already shaky faith in the leadership.
So a stagnant system, drained by war, riddled with corruption. And then came Gorbachev in 85 with perestroika and glasnost. He tried to fix it.
He did. These reforms were genuinely intended to save the Soviet system, to modernize it, make it more efficient, more open. Perestroika restructuring was about loosening up the economy a bit, allowing some market forces. Glasnost openness was about easing censorship, allowing some criticism, hoping to make things more accountable.
But it backfired spectacularly.
Massively. It was one of history's great ironies. Instead of saving the system, the reforms basically opened the floodgates. Once people could speak more freely, once the economic controls loosened just a little, all the pent-up problems, ethnic hatreds, economic frustrations, anger at the party just exploded.
The state couldn't control it anymore.
Exactly. The forces unleashed were too powerful. It was like trying to fix a crumbling dam by chipping away at it. The very act of trying to repair it brought the whole thing crashing down.
Which leads back to Ferguson's point about the unexpected collapse. Nobody really saw 1991 coming back in, say, in 1985.
Very few did. The system looked flawed, sure, but still powerful, still permanent to most eyes. It really drives home his warning. Empires can look stable right up until the moment they aren't. The cracks aren't always obvious until it's too late.
Makes you wonder what cracks we might be missing today, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Are we paying attention, or are we assuming resilience that might not be as deep as we think?
And Ferguson frames all this within a bigger picture, doesn't he? A new global competition. The stakes. Cold War II with China.
Yes, this is crucial to his argument. He's not just looking at U.S. internal issues in a vacuum. He sees them playing out against the backdrop of a growing rivalry with China, kind of Cold War II.
How does that parallel work?
Well, just like the USSR faced a technologically stronger U.S., Ferguson argues America now faces a rising China, that's pouring resources into key technologies. AI, quantum computing, green energy, often with focused state direction. It's a serious technological and economic race.
And China's economy, despite its own issues, is still growing.
It is. It's slowing down, has demographic problems, real estate bubbles, sure, but it's still projected to overtake the U.S. in purchasing power parity terms, which is a key measure of economic weight.
So Ferguson's warning is,
If America gets bogged down by internal sclerosis, the aging leaders, the debt, the polarization, the social problems, the overstretched refinement, then China could pull ahead and become the dominant global power.
and the chilling difference he points out.
The USSR collapsed mainly from its own internal weakness. Ferguson worries America could decline not from fundamental weakness, but from complacency, from failing to adapt and fix its problems while it still appears strong on the surface.
Complacency as the killer. That's a scary thought. But okay, let's pivot back to those American strengths, because the analogy does break down. Most people agree the U.S. isn't the USSR, where the analogy breaks down and America's strengths remain.
Right. We have to be clear about this. The U.S. has fundamental advantages the Soviets never had. That open economy, that democratic adaptability we talk about, the sheer cultural pluralism. These are deep structural strengths.
And specific assets, too. Things the USSR just lacked entirely.
Completely. Ferguson himself notes this. The Soviet Union had no Silicon Valley churning out innovation, no Hollywood dominating global culture, no constant influx of entrepreneurial immigrants refreshing the gene pool, so to speak. These are uniquely powerful American assets, engines of renewal.
Plus, America's bounced back before. The history of reinvention.
Absolutely. Think about the crises America's overcome. The Civil War, the Great Depression, the turmoil of the 70s, the 2008 crash. Each time the country found ways to reform, adapt, reinvent itself. It's shown an incredible capacity for self-correction.
That's almost America's brand, isn't it? The ability to fix itself.
It is. But the big question Ferguson leaves hanging is, does that capacity still exist? Or has the sclerosis he diagnoses become too deep? Can that self-correction muscle still flex? That's what's really at stake.
Which brings us right to the final critical part. If Ferguson is right, even partially, what are the remedies for renewal? What's the path forward if these warnings are a wake-up call?
This is where it gets really interesting and maybe frustrating. Ferguson lays out three broad solutions. He also points out this deep paradox. America seems incredibly resistant to all three.
The solutions are there, but the political will isn't.
That seems to be his assessment. It's a stark disconnect between knowing what needs to be done and being able to actually do it.
Okay, let's hear them. Remedy number one, immigration, the engine of demographic renewal. Why is this first on his list?
Because historically, it's been America's secret weapon, as he calls it. For 200 years, immigrants have revitalized the workforce, sparked innovation, brought new energy, and right now, with U.S. birth rates falling well below replacement level 1.6 kids per woman in 2023, you need 2.1 just to stay stable. And the leadership aging. Immigration is the most direct antidote to demographic decline.
Without it, the workforce shrinks, productivity potentially falls, like in the late USSR.
Potentially, yes. Plus, immigrants are statistically more likely to start businesses, file patents. They're huge drivers of dynamism.
Right.
Look at Silicon Valley, founded and run by immigrants and their kids to an incredible degree. The IMF says recent immigration added 0.5 point to U.S. GDP growth each year. It's a massive economic benefit.
And it's soft power too, right? Building connections.
Definitely. Cultural exchange, global networks.
Yeah.
Huge assets.
So the benefits seem obvious. Why are there resistance? Why is it so hard?
Politics. It's become one of the most toxic, polarized issues. The border crisis, with millions of encounters, fuels this narrative of chaos and invasion, making rational discussion almost impossible.
Nativist rhetoric gets amplified.
Hugely. And the result is a totally dysfunctional system. Gridlock in Congress, conflicting policies. We just can't seem to create a large-scale managed immigration system that actually serves the country's needs, unlike, say, Canada or Australia with their point systems.
So the paradox is,
just when America needs immigration most to counter aging and boost the economy, it's politically least able to embrace it constructively. It's deeply ironic and potentially damaging.
okay, remedy number two, multipolarity, sharing the burden of empire. This tackles the overstretch problem.
Exactly. Ferguson says the U.S., like the late Soviets, is just stretched too thin trying to be the world's policeman. Maintaining all those bases, funding NATO, intervening everywhere, it's unsustainable, especially with a rising China and other powers.
It's a 20th century model in a 21st century world.
That's the argument. In a world with a strong EU, India, Japan, Brazil, and others, clinging to unipolar dominance is exhausting and counterproductive. Embracing multipolarity means sharing responsibilities, letting allies carry more weight.
What's the benefit of that?
It frees up American resources, money, attention, political capital that could be invested back home. Infrastructure, education, R&D, the things that build real long-term strength. It's about leading smartly, collaboratively, not trying to do everything alone.
Sounds pragmatic, so why the resistance here?
Deep-seated unipolar thinking in Washington. The foreign policy establishment often sees sharing power as decline, as losing influence, rather than smart adaptation. Influence gets measured in bases and budgets, not partnerships.
The indispensable nation mindset.
That's a big part of it, fear of losing global leadership.
Yeah.
But the irony, Ferguson warns, is that stubbornly resisting multipolarity actually accelerates overstretch. It forces the U.S. down the same path of exhaustion the Soviets took. It's self-defeating.
Wow. Another paradox. Okay, third remedy. A true partnership with India, an equal ally. Why India specifically?
Because India is unique and indispensable in the 21st century. Huge population, 1.4 billion. Growing economy, critical location, shared democratic values, broadly speaking. It's vital for balancing China.
It's not a rival like China or a dependent ally like maybe some in Europe.
Exactly. It offers scale, growth, and independence. It shares U.S. concerns about China's rise. It's a natural heavyweight partner.
But the relationship has been tricky.
Very uneven, historically. Cold War estrangement, U.S. tilt to Pakistan, India's ties to Moscow. Things warmed up dramatically after 2000. The nuclear deal, the Quad, defense ties now.
But not quite a true partnership yet.
Ferguson argues trust is still fragile. The U.S. sometimes comes across as paternalistic, lecturing India on human rights or trade. India pushes back, insists on strategic autonomy, keeping its options open, like maintaining ties with Russia.
So what's needed for a real partnership?
Equality. The U.S. needs to treat India as a genuine peer, not a junior partner to be managed.
How? What would that look like?
Concrete things. Support India for a permanent UN Security Council seat. Negotiate trade deals that respect India's situation. Respect its domestic choices, even when they differ from U.S. values. Build truly joint projects. Think like the U.S.-UK special relationship, but between equals.
And again, why does the U.S. resist treating India as an equal?
Culture and institutions, mostly. That American exceptionalism makes it hard to accept true peers. The foreign policy blob is used to allies following the U.S. lead. It undermines trust, limits cooperation, and risks pushing away a crucial partner just when that partnership is most needed.
So the remedies are clear. Immigration, multipolarity, partnership with India. But the obstacles to reform seem massive. It really does sound like the Soviet problem you mentioned, knowing the issues but being unable to act.
It's a powerful and worrying parallel. Domestically, polarization blocks immigration reform. Protectionism hinders trade partnerships. Institutionally, the Pentagon and State Department are geared for primacy, not power sharing. Culturally, that exceptionalist mindset resists seeing the world as truly multipolar.
So these factors combine to create inertia and paralysis?
Exactly. A system too rigid to reform, too proud to adapt, too divided to respond effectively. That's the core of Ferguson's warning. It mirrors the Soviet trap.
It really shows, doesn't it, that figuring out the solution is the easy part. Finding the political will, the cultural shift, the institutional flexibility to actually do it, that's the real challenge.
It's the difference between diagnosis and cure. And history is littered with empires that knew the diagnosis but couldn't stomach the cure.
Well, this has been an incredibly rich and maybe unsettling deep dive into Niall Ferguson's question, are we the Soviets now? Just to wrap up, his core message isn't a literal prediction, it's a warning.
A deliberately provocative one, yeah. Holding up that historical mirror to make us confront potential signs of decay. The gerontocracy, the debt, the conformity, the social problems, the overstretch. He's saying, don't be complacent, don't ignore these symptoms.
But we also have to remember American resilience. The U.S. is different from the USSR in fundamental ways. Democracy, innovation, diversity. These are huge strengths. Collapse isn't fated.
Not at all. But renewal isn't guaranteed either. That capacity for self-correction needs to be actively used, not just assumed.
So the real value here isn't about saying we're doomed. It's the cautionary lesson. Great powers often decay slowly from within. Denial just speeds it up. History shows empires can crumble silently until, suddenly, the cracks show.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you, our listener. America still has time. There's still a window to choose renewal, to choose reform over rigidity. The solutions Ferguson and others propose are out there.
But the question that lingers for all of us is, does America, unlike Moscow in the 1980s, recognize reform as the key to survival, not a sign of weakness? And will it find the collective will to choose that path?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is something for us all to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you plenty to consider.